How many times have you started a new series and instantly fell in love, just to find, as the series progresses, it becomes considerably worse? And I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. There are countless forums, countless videos of people ripping into series which failed, which, whilst funny, never really answer the question, what went wrong, and how could they have been improved? Now, whilst I'm not claiming to be a television expert, I do have the Fred Trilogy box set. I can highlight the general consensus that people have come to, mixed with my own opinions to come to my own conclusion, and if you disagree, you're just wrong. Now, to understand how to end the series, I've chosen two series. One with a great ending, highlighting how to end the series, and Game of Thrones.
Snuff the Beatles! Snuff them! Go!
Now, to be fair to Game of Thrones, in its time it was the biggest social phenomenon, being an exciting fantasy drama that broke records after records. However, that doesn't change the fact they failed to keep the writing engaging and left the audience disappointed. Season 8 can be summed up in one phrase: missed opportunities. Now, I don't have to sit here and tell you how good Breaking Bad is. It has 92 awards after all, and the lowest rated season of Breaking Bad is 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's the first season. It is, without a doubt, one of the greatest TV shows ever created, and it pioneered a new way of writing characters within shows. Bryan Cranston on the Team Coco podcast said this:
He wanted to change the main character throughout the course of the series, which has never been done in series television. If you look at Archie Bunker, Tony Soprano, or whomever, they are the same people. They react to different stimulus, but they are the same person, whereas Walter White was going to change from a good, honest guy to becoming a killer.
And that, right there, made it instantly stand out, becoming recognised as one of the GOATs of television, alongside Fred. Now, I must admit, whilst Breaking Bad was airing, I was too busy for all of that. I was instead doing things like riding bikes and watching TDM. However, when COVID hit in 2020 and everyone was locked inside, I began my first watch through. Due to the circumstances of the world at that time, and given my age, I had absolutely zero responsibilities, I was able to watch all 66 episodes of Breaking Bad within 1 week. Whether or not that's a flex is up to you. I'd end up staying up until the early hours of the morning, trying to squeeze in one more episode just because of how insanely good it was. And when the show ended, I was left in awe. Breaking Bad knew when to end. Breaking Bad knew not to fade out, and instead finished just as strong as it started. And the general consensus for this being is that the producers knew exactly the story they wanted to tell and had a generalised outline from the beginning all the way through to its end. And I can't help but agree with this. Whilst they didn't have everything planned out, for example, Jesse was meant to die in season 1 and Tuco was meant to last a lot longer, I think it is clear they had an A and B story where they wanted it to start and finish. The story of a nice, simple family man becoming an evil murderer. I don't need to tell you how bad the last season of Game of Thrones is, but I will. It's bad. I mean, even the cast don't like it.
I couldn't let you go without asking you a little question about Game of Thrones.
Sure.
If you could describe the season finale of Game of Thrones in one word, how would you describe it?
Disappointing.
I mean, it had a stacked cast, very good actors, it had insane effects, and more spectacle than you really know what to do with, and none of that could really save it from its truly stinky writing. Additionally, this isn't just something that's relevant to this show. In most cases where a series fades away, slowly becoming irrelevant, and so far from the source material that it's lost its initial viewer base. If you watch the show from start to finish, you'll watch the soul of the show slowly die. What was once important at first has been completely forgotten about and replaced with a big dragon, because that's how you write fantasy. The biggest flaw in Game of Thrones is, to me, what the biggest achievement is in Breaking Bad. Consistency. Consistency, to me, is the defining factor in what changes the outcome of a series. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, let me show you some examples. In Game of Thrones, Peter Baelish is established in the first seasons as a smart, cunning political figure with mysterious goals. Everything he does works as a twist for the audience, but not in the way of being a twist just for the sake of it. Every action he's shown to make is thought out and makes sense in the story. This is, of course, until the writers ran out of source material and had to start improvising. In season 6, old Pete just isn't the same character anymore. And when I'm talking about consistency, I just don't mean within the characters, I also mean within the show itself. In the space of one episode, he teleports over half the continent, in a show where travelling long distances is shown to be important, and shown to take time. He travels quite literally from the far side of the Vale to Molestown. Literally at the wall. And I get the writers want to make this seem like a super secret meeting happening in a broken brothel for symbolism. However, that would mean he left his army undetected to travel across half of the largest continent just to have a chit chat with Sansa. Now, whilst this may seem like a small thing to nitpick about, it suspends the viewer's disbelief, and once the cracks of disbelief begin, it just makes the story seem so much less real. And additionally, if the writers are writing this to be super secret, why is he just okay with Bran being there? It just doesn't make a lot of sense for any of this to happen. If he's already going to the wall, why not just go to Castle Black? It doesn't make sense. However, my trusted viewer, this is not where the inconsistency ends. Peter Baelish, one of the smartest characters on the show, says to Sansa that he is aware that Jon is in charge of the campaign, which then begs the question, why did he come to Sansa with this proposition? Jon would be far more receptive to Peter than Sansa ever should be, given what he did to her literally in the season. And on top of this, Jon is actively trying to gather more houses to fight alongside him. This to me is the perfect example of the writers missing the mark. Instead of having Jon Snow, the man driven by honour due to his father, meet Peter Baelish, the man who killed his father for selfish reasons, they choose to have Pete meet Sansa because he has like a crush on her or something. Missed opportunity. The phrase perfectly describes this show, and has been used over and over again. The great character of Peter Baelish is now just a plot device for Sansa and her wash story. This is not how you write characters, and everything above I've listed is why the show, as it ended, lost interest and lost the legacy it could have built. Writing a story where your character goes against all of their established traits without any reason or change within the character is how consistency ruins shows. The character, who is meant to be one of the smartest political figures, who constantly schemes and in his own words, literally thinks of everything that could possibly happen all of the time.
Everyone is your enemy. Everyone is your friend. Everyone is your enemy. Live that way. Everyone is your enemy. Everything that happens will be enemy.
Hands the person he loves to the Boltons. The Boltons openly flail people, and he thinks Stannis is going to win against them anyway. And after this, he goes to Cersei to tell her the Boltons have captured Sansa, so he will be granted the title of Warden of the North when Stannis wins the war, which he thinks will happen. Which, okay, kinda makes sense. Cersei makes him Warden of the North when Stannis wins the war and gets Cersei back. Cersei's only there for so long. Whatever. Kinda makes sense, until he then goes to Olenna and undermines Cersei, making her lose the power to make him Warden of the North. This just begs the question, why? This character is meant to be smart? What is happening? Help me? Right, let's just take a break from that. A Breaking Bad. Consistency is Breaking Bad. Every season the main cast of characters go through changes, yet all of these changes make sense and lock together, one after the other like a jigsaw puzzle. The writing does a great job of making sure the audience knows who the characters are. Everything these characters do are understandable based on how they've been established earlier within the series. We must remember, and I will keep saying this, that Breaking Bad is a story of a suburban high school teacher who descends into the criminal world until it consumes him. A story of these two polar opposite things being thrust into one character. Breaking Bad's ending is a 9.9 out of 10 on IMDb. So I think it's right that if we're reviewing how to end a series, we'll look at the so-called perfect ending to a series. This episode is a perfect example of Breaking Bad's willingness to explore moral dilemmas in very disturbing ways. This episode starts with Walt breaking into an unlocked car. Whilst he fails to hotwire the car, a police cruiser drives past him. In this moment, we see Walt cower in fear, murmuring to himself, "Just get me home." Once the police car drives past, Walt lifts up the sun visor and finds spare keys in there. Now, this moment in most other series could be seen as a big contrivance. However, the producers of the show pay such close attention to detail, making the car already unlocked. With spare keys inside, it makes sense that the owner would then leave the car unlocked. My point is, you don't have to suspend your disbelief for these sort of things to happen. You can believe that the car would be unlocked and there'd be spare keys there because of how it's all framed. We then see Walt drive from Hampshire back to Albuquerque. In these moments, he takes the last of his medications and then goes towards the payphone. On the payphone, he acts like a reporter to get the address of Gretchen and Elliot.
It's their call. I know how busy Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz are. This should make one hell of a story. Goodbye.
When he ends the call, we have a very odd moment which isn't really narratively explained, but is more explained by the producers. We see Walt take off the watch that Jesse gave him. Now, whilst narratively this could be seen as Walt leaving behind his past and leaving behind Jesse, the real reason is because of production. In some of the trailers towards the build-up of the final season, Walt doesn't have his watch on in some of the shots. And there isn't any real reason why Walt wouldn't be wearing his watch compared to things like his clones, which, you would change. So this is just another example of the writers being so consistent, so on the dot, paying attention to every fine detail. Here, we see Walt lurking in the shadows. He's truly the personification of evil now. The way he casually lurks, like a stalker, like he's done this before, which he has. He breaks into Gretchen and Elliot's home, and then he confronts them. Walt tells Gretchen and Elliot that he wanted to get them something from his car. Now to the viewers this could be alarming, because the last thing we've seen in Walt's car is a fully loaded M16. In response, Elliot threatens him with a knife, where Walt then confirms our assumption by insinuating that he'd need a bigger knife if he wanted to fight Walter.
Elliot, if we're gonna go that way, you'll need a bigger knife.
This is when the episode then cuts to them actually just pulling money out of his car and onto the table. In this moment, he's forcing them to give Walt Jr. his money in a trust fund. To ensure this works, he then threatens them with hitmen. In a very cathartic scene, he tells them that they will always be being watched if they do not do his exact commands.
For any reason that my children do not get this money, a kind of countdown will begin.
This is a perfect example of consistency within the show. Throughout the series, Walt has shown his resentment towards Gretchen and Elliot.
Fuck you.
And for grey matter, and additionally in the previous episode, Walt reached his total final low, with his son wishing him to death and refusing any of the money to save his family, the money that he ruined his family for. Walt has always hated Gretchen and Elliot for their charity, as if they were looking down on him.
That I should go begging for your charity, and you waving your checkbook around like some magic wand is going to make me forget how you and Elliot cut me out.
And in his final interaction with them, he does this one last time, ensuring that all payments must be used with Walt's money, lest they wish to die. Once Walt leaves, it's revealed that the hitmen with lasers were actually just Badger and Skinny Pete with laser pointers. This is, again, a perfect example of Heisenberg and the consistency of that character. We then cut to Jesse making his wooden box, which was previously talked about in the show during therapy. This moment shows Jesse working incredibly hard to achieve his goals. This is when we are subtly hard cut with Jesse being tied up as a slave in Jack's meth lab. The next scene is Lydia in the tea shop. We get these classic scenes of Lydia using putting stevia in her tea. Walt comes over to Lydia and Todd and begs them to go back into the meth industry with him, finding a new way to cook without methylamine. Once Walter has left, Lydia tells Todd that they have to kill Walter. The next scene is Walt being seen making a device that works from his car keys, which rotates in the back of his boot. In this moment, as it works, we get a shot of his ring falling from his neck, a symbol of what all of his hard work has been for, one last push. The next scene is Skylar, in a new house, where she is seen to be returned to smoking due to the stress, and is back at odds with Marie.
Wow, so surprising.
Marie begs Skylar to stay on alert, because Walt is back in Albuquerque. In response, Skylar says she'll be on the lookout. This is when the camera rotates, and we see Walt is standing right in front of her. Now, multiple times in this scene, Skylar has asked Walt and Marie if he's hurt anybody. This shows Skylar's inner mind and how the image of Walt, from a loving husband, the father of her children, has turned into someone consumed by greed and is now in its final form, with her being completely terrified of him and assuming that he must have killed or done evil to get where he wants to be. In this moment, Walt hands Skylar the lottery ticket with the numbers of the coordinates of where the bodies are buried. He does this as one last sort of save for her to stop her from getting such a long sentence. Walt, in a very cathartic moment, admits that this was all for him.
I have to hear one more time that you did this for the family.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. And I was alive.
He recognizes that he's become selfish, and it takes a weight off Skylar. Now she knows he fully blames himself for his actions, and not the people around him. The biggest lie is now over. He gives his last goodbye to his daughter, and watches his son come home before he leaves. Now in this final scene we're going to get some serious attention to detail, which I just love. Walt arrives at Jack's place and deliberately ignores the car park to pull up alongside the building. Walt's back seats are searched, and he is searched for wires and weapons. On top of this, someone is told to stay outside to watch for backup. Now, some people have said that it's a bit lucky that they didn't search the boot, or it's a bit, convenient for the plot that didn't happen. However, there are multiple scenes where it's shown that they are checking the back seats and Walt's person. There's no reason to suspect there is any reinforcements in Walt's boot, and he has come there unarmed. It's very clear that it seems like he doesn't really have a plan going in there. Inside, Walt taunts Jack to get Jesse out because he didn't kill him when he promised he would, and has instead been partnered with him. Partnered in very big air quotes. As Jesse is brought out, Walt and Jesse lock eyes and share a very tortured stare, both of them incredibly ruined by their actions. Suddenly, Walt seems to attack Jesse, dragging him to the floor. At the same time, he presses the remote on his keys, and the machine gun pops open and fires into the building, killing everybody inside except Jack and Todd, and obviously Walt and Jesse.
Yes! Hell yeah! Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on! Ah! Yes!
As Todd slowly gets up, not showing what just happened, Jesse sneaks up behind him and strangles him until he snaps his neck. Whilst this is happening, Walt grabs a gun off the floor, walks over to Jack and shoots him mid-sentence, just how he did to Hank previously. After Jesse has freed himself, Walt hands the gun over to Jesse, where Jesse then points the gun at him. Jesse refuses to fire until he says that this is what he wants. This is where it's revealed that Walter has actually been shot. Now this moment is yet again another example of consistency within the characters. Throughout the whole series, Jesse has had to do horrible things as a direct result of Walt's orders. In this moment, as Jesse literally frees himself, he's now figuratively freeing himself from the commands of Walt, refusing to do his bidding, dropping the gun, telling him to do it himself, and leaving. After Jesse is left, the room's silence stops and is instead filled with a ringtone. It's Lydia, and she's calling Jack to ask if Walt is now dead. This is where Walt, in a cold moment, straight up tells Lydia that she's been poisoned and is going to die. Which is incredibly cathartic for the audience, because Lydia can piss off. Walt and Jesse have their final look at each other, with Walt giving him an approval nod. Jesse drives off, freeing himself, crying in joy. Walt, recognising that his injury is fatal, decides not to die, calling his family. Walt decides to die in the place he felt most alive. He walks over to the meth lab that Jesse was cooking in, examines the equipment, and in one final moment, drops dead. So, after all that, can I tell you how to end a series? Not really. But I can show you that bad writing and a lack of consistency killed a show that could have been one of the greatest ever. And an example of how paying attention whilst writing your characters, making them consistent in a well-written plot, made a show one of the greats, forever leaving a legacy in television.